Monday, November 15th at 6 o'clock, we're at the Town Hall in Auburn here for the Public Safety Facilities Advisory Committee meeting. It's been a while quite a while, I think, since we've had a meeting. But there was some updates that town administration, as well as I see the architects here, Chief Coleman, Lieutenant Lemon, they've got some updates for the committee, some things that we need to discuss as to what our next steps are in the process, things that have come to fruition or not come to fruition, I think, in most cases here, relative to this process and how we envision things we're going to move forward, primarily related to lots to pieces of land for this potential project. So, Julie, did you want to give a presentation? Thank you.
I just want to make sure, okay, it's on. You can all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So I don't have a formal presentation, but just wanted to get back to the committee. Rachel in my office had sent you all some information last week. After your last meeting, you had asked town administration to look into a couple of different options, one being an option for potentially using Lomansky Park as a site for a joint facility. So why don't, the other option was, what is the process involved with eminent domain, should you decide to move forward on that? And then the third thing we wanted to come back to you on was additional discussion on West Street. Is it working? Thank you. So I'll try to make it a shorter story, but after your last meeting, we, town administration, myself, Ed, and Chief Coleman reached out to the state to get some information from them on what the process would be to remove part of Lomansky Park. So primarily, we looked at about 5 acres that we thought might be able to be used to site the public safety facility. And the history of Lomansky Park is that it was acquired utilizing a federal grant called the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And the Land and Water Conservation Fund provides grant funding to states that then provide it to municipalities. So it still follows federal guidelines, but because the land was acquired with it, it also follows state guidelines. So there are 2 different processes that have to be followed to remove any portion of a park that was acquired with these funds. So regardless of whether you're trying to reuse the whole park or you're trying to just reuse a part of the park, you still have to follow 2 separate processes, but they're kind of intertwined. One is I just want to make sure, John, is it all set up? Thank you. John's our IT guy, just making sure we're all set. Thank you. So there's 2 processes. Both of these are very time consuming, and I will honestly say I think a lot of the reason for that is it's obviously these types of things are discouraged in many cases because the federal government, the state government don't want you to get grant funding and then years later turn around and say, well, actually we've changed our mind, we don't want to use it for that. This is a little different situation. I think this is something that ultimately the state and the federal government may be supportive of, but the process to get there is extremely lengthy. So there are 2 processes. There is the Article 97 process. So if you hear Article 97, that's for recreation land that is under Mass General Law, must remain recreational land unless you take it out of Article 97. And to do that, you have to follow a state process. It's outlined in here, so I don't want to have to go through the whole thing, but I'll give you some highlights. But the second piece that you have to follow is actually the federal process. And under the federal process, you have to go through a number of steps, but primarily the step is that you have to apply to the National Park Service, which is federal. And on our call with the state contact that we had for this, she informed us that that process is a minimum of 3 years. She said technically it used to be a 2-year process, and she said with any luck, you'd get it in at 3 years. She said it's running an average of 3 years. And that is a critical piece of getting land converted out of recreational use into anything other than recreational use, which a public safety facility falls under. So that's the first piece of it. So that's a pretty lengthy process. The other piece that's involved in this is you have to replace the land that you're taking out. So if you take 5 acres out of the park, you have to recreate those 5 acres exactly as you removed them. So if you're removing 2 fields, you have to recreate 2 fields. If you were removing walking trails, you have to recreate walking trails. We asked if we could remove fields and substitute it with walking trails. If we need walking trails, and maybe we don't need 2 fields, maybe we need 1 field, and you cannot do that. So it's equal replacement. Exactly what is removed has to be replaced. It has to be replaced in 2 ways. One is acreage. So 5 acres has to be replaced with a minimum of 5 acres, a minimum. You can go higher, but you can't go lower. And the other is valuation. You actually have to have appraised values on the property that you're removing. So you'd have to get an appraisal on the 5 acres at Lemansky. Then you'd have to get an appraisal on 5 acres elsewhere in town and make sure that the values are similar. If there's a big delta between the values, it's another process that you have to go through with the state as well as the federal government to explain to them and hopefully get their approval as to why there's a delta, why you couldn't get the properties to have equalized value. You can't take a property that's currently utilized as a recreation parcel and declare it Article 97. So in other words, you couldn't take an existing field, even if it's not under Article 97, and just say, well, we're going to declare it Article 97. You have to actually create new fields. So we would have to find a location in town to create the new fields. Then you have 3 years to rebuild the fields. So within the 3 years of getting all your approvals, you have to rebuild the fields. So the Article 97 process does involve, in addition to the National Park Service, which appears to be on the federal side, the very popular. I'm afraid.
The problem is people on the road inherit like this.
Right.
Unless you go up there. And nothing but it.
Okay. So is there anyone on the committee that should be hearing some of this, Kevin, or?
Got a text saying that they lost you.
Okay, so it was one of those callers that
Hear
we,
her on that distance, but they could hear her. And I think you need to unmute the.
caller 3.
So so just
Unmuted.
to reiterate quickly, the federal portion of the process is there's an entire book that you have to go through in all the processes, and it starts with the National Park Service, and again, that's the lengthy time. In the meantime, on our end, you need to get, which is not a difficult thing on a local level, you need your unanimous vote of your Conservation Commission, your Parks Commission. Then you need to declare the land as somewhat, it's similar to declaring it as surplus. Then from there, you have to come up with your plan, which includes all your appraisals, your identification of the new site, when you're going to build it, how you're going to build it. And then you also need to have a 2/3 vote of town meeting to apply to the legislature, to file legislation to remove it from Article 97, and then I believe it's a 2/3 vote of the Massachusetts legislature to remove it from Article 97. And then in addition, it has to be approved by the National Park Service. So there are a lot of approvals involved. From a timing perspective, it looks like the minimum would be 3 years. The process most likely would take somewhere between 3 and 5 years. It all depends on the timing of it, the timing of when all this would take place, when your town meeting is, when you might have to schedule a special town meeting, when the legislature is in session, when that gets filed. So there's a lot of moving parts, which is why we say 3.5 to 5 years, depending on what time of year you ended up in any of these processes. And you're really not going to know that until you get underway with the process, especially with the National Park Service. So that's pretty much the summary of Lemansky Park. I think at this point, our recommendation is, and our consultants would tell us this, that if we were to go through that type of process over the next 5 years before we even started the project to actually build the facility, that the costs are going to escalate significantly. And the savings that we may realize by building on a parcel that the town already owns may be wiped out by the escalation in the costs, as well as the cost to now rebuild those fields. It's identifying the land that you need to have it on, replacing it, and making sure that you rebuild those fields in 3 years. So from a cost perspective, it may be maybe a little bit less, or it may be no savings at all. But I think from a timing perspective, the concern was, do we really want to wait 5 years to find out that hopefully we get state and federal approvals? But we wouldn't know that for a minimum of 3 years, because you've got to get that approval from National Park Service. So I don't know if you, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions on that part of the process.
Anybody have any questions relative to the request for the town to?
Are there 5 acres in Auburn available?
There are potentially some acreage available. Yes. I say potentially because you'd have to do the analysis of the evaluation of the property to make sure that it's equalized value. So maybe the 5 acres that you're replacing at Lemansky may be more expensive than the 5 acres that you've chosen in another location, or it may be less expensive.
The 5 acres that are potentially available, have they been looked at for this potential project, if there is acreage available?
We looked quickly at it. We didn't know what direction the committee wanted us to go in. If the committee decided that they wanted to follow this process, we would have to look at it. You have to do a whole analysis of all your parcels. We didn't go that step. I can tell you we know of a couple of places that it could potentially fit. We originally thought that we would look at, again, we were thinking of some areas that the town already owns that would be a nice area for walking trails, but you can't replace fields with walking trails, so we can't use that. We do own some land behind the Pappas complex, actually beside it, over off of Cutting Ave, at the end of Cutting. There's land there. We do use it for some other things, but there is land there. It's fairly flat. As far as access and redevelopment, we have not gone that far. We wouldn't do that kind of analysis unless we thought the committee would go further, but that's a potential. And then there is acreage that the town purchased as a result of a Chapter 61A sale, which is it went from agricultural to a private sale. And the town had right of first refusal, and they exercised that right in October or November of 2014. So the town purchased that land off of South Hold Road. I believe it's a total of 50 acres for just about $3 million. So that land is there. It has to be remain as municipal land for at least the 10 years of the time that we bonded the land. So there's a potential there. Again, some of that land is probably not good for fields. There is one section that might be sufficient for fields. So I think it's not, when we looked at it, I think you could find a place to relocate fields if that was the option. It was more the timeline of going through the process of getting the land removed and whether the town is going to want to wait, 3 to 5 years to find out if we can even move forward. Sure.
Sorry, one more question. If this land is available potentially for fields, why isn't it available for the public facilities?
Because of the location.
All right, so it's purely just location.
Yep. As far as a joint facility with the fire department, there are specific locational, site-specific areas that they need to be in. They need to be in a certain radius to have the one facility, and we weren't able to find a property, which is why now if we even were to look at West Street, they would still have to retain the facility at Drury Square because they have to cover that side. The parcels that I just mentioned are at the top of Package Hog Hill, so they're up in the corner, the northern corner of the town, so it wouldn't be sufficient for public safety. It probably wouldn't be sufficient for either facility because of the location. They're both right in neighborhoods, not on main roads.
So any questions relative to Lemansky before we? Did you want to touch on our additional?
Sure, just quickly, I'll just touch on eminent domain, because the committee had talked about it at the last meeting, just asked about the possibility. It is always a possibility. I think we talked about that in one of your first meetings. It's a possibility. It's probably not a desirable way to go unless there was no other option. If you have no other option and you have to go after a parcel, then you can go after it through eminent domain. And I should mention, because we had a conversation with the chief this afternoon, I just want to make sure we're clear on this too. Depending on the parcel, under Chapter 30B, it's called a unique procurement or unique property. And that would pretty much be what you call sole source, meaning there's only one property that fits your needs. So that is how part of the Masonic Lodge property was acquired for the middle school, because it was a sole source. It was a unique property. You had to have a property that abutted town property. That was the only one that could have done it. So you're allowed to direct negotiate. Then you have to still follow everything under Chapter 30B to do that, but it's called a unique property under the law. There are two properties that abut the West Street site that are privately owned properties. There are two of them. So if we wanted to purchase one of them through a direct negotiation, we would have to get a determination, I believe through town council, that it's sole source, because there are two parcels there, not one. If there was only one parcel that abutted the land, that's your sole, that's unique, it's the only one. I don't know how the state would look at the other parcel that also abuts the town. So there's one on either side. They're both abutters. They're both fairly equal in current valuation and fairly equal in size. So I don't know under the law if you could make the argument that one is the sole source. You possibly could. So if you could make that argument, then you go through the process that we went through for the middle school, which is to direct negotiate if the owner of the property is interested in selling. If the property has any tenants or business on it, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial, the town is required to pay the relocation costs on top of the costs of the purchase in an eminent domain situation. In a direct purchase, you still have to get the appraisals, determine what the value is, negotiate that value with the property owner, and then you can come up with a purchase price. Then you can still need to get all your approvals, town meeting approvals, et cetera. So if you had a willing property owner that was an abutter, you could enter into a direct negotiation as long as we could get that declared sole source. Again, that would be more of a question for town council. If neither abutter was interested or willing to sell their property, then you'd have to go the eminent domain route. So the eminent domain route is also pretty lengthy, probably not quite as lengthy as what we'd have to go through to remove parkland. But the eminent domain process requires that you get generally two appraisals. If there's a discrepancy, I believe you have to get a third appraisal. But you start with the two appraisals and you you find the price between the two appraisals. The town makes a determination based on the appraisals what they're going to pay for the property. The property owner has the right to accept a pro tanto award, which means they accept a partial payment for what the town agrees to pay, and then they go to court and fight it out in court as to what the value is and what the final purchase price would be. And the court process itself can probably take 2 to 3 years. The owner of the property actually has, I believe it's 3 years to even file a claim. The town can move forward in the meantime, but it would be tied up in court for as long as it took that property owner to dispute the amount of the purchase. And again, that's assuming the property owner doesn't like the purchase price, opposes the purchase price. Generally, in an eminent domain case, you will see the property owner go to court to see if they could get more. That's general. And if the cost comes in higher, if a higher cost is awarded by the court, the town is required to pay the legal fees for the entire legal process on top of the additional fees. So that can be a pretty lengthy process. It's probably 1 to 2 years to go through just the eminent domain process alone, minus the court procedures that may or may not take place after that, which could take another 2 to 4 years. So that's, again, eminent domain is always a possibility. It wouldn't be our recommendation unless there were no other options. If there was nothing else and we need a public safety facility, that's your option. It is a tool available, but it is a lengthy tool. So that would then bring us to the only other option, which would be the West Street site. And in a minute, I'll turn to the chief to see if he wants to add anything about the West Street site itself, because he's worked a lot with our consultant on that, but that would be an option. And there were 2 options on the West Street site, going with the current site as it already stands, acreage-wise. We could fit a joint public safety complex on that site. It would involve relocating and rebuilding. There's a small, very small field behind between the middle school and the facility that's now used as the school department and the fire department. There's a small field that would have to be relocated. It's not large. There is an area that appears to work on the other side of the middle school to do that. So if we did that, you could fit a site there. If you wanted to reposition the building so that you had your police department facing on Southbridge Street and your fire department facing on West Street, both still connected but different facing, then you would have to look at the possibility of negotiating if you could get a sole source. And I should add, if you can't get a sole source, you can also put an RFP out. And so if there are 2 properties and it's determined that there is really no one property that's a unique property because they're both equally able to be redeveloped, then the town could put an RFP out requesting property owners make an offer to the town to sell their property. And then you notify the owners that are impacted in that area, let everyone in that area know we're looking for a parcel that's abutting our site, and they can make an offer on it. That doesn't work, then you have to go to the eminent domain. So if you wanted to expand the current size of the property to reacclimate the direction that the police department section would be facing versus the fire department, you would need to get that extra piece of land. So those are pretty much the options. Chief, did you want to add anything?
No, you covered it all. Just, I guess the one thing that I would add is that if, for whatever reason, we were not able to obtain either one of those parcels that are adjacent, we do have a test fit of the building on the current West Street site with the school administration and the fire station. Even if we were not able to obtain one of those sites, the project is not dead in the water. But I think when you sort of look at the property with one of those adjacent properties, it gives us a lot more options to do that. It gives us a lot more options to do that in terms of property availability, parking, as Julie mentioned, forward-facing police station on Southbridge Street versus both on West Street. But depending on what the committee, chooses to do and what direction they're looking, to recommend, I just wanted to make it clear that the project is not dead in the water. We do have a test fit that the building will go on West Street. It would just certainly be more restricted in space than if we could get one of those other adjacent properties. Jeff from Tecton is here, and he'd be more than willing to answer any questions that you have as far as the test fits and pros and cons to those other adjacent sites as well.
While we've got Julie at the podium, do anybody have questions relative to the eminent domain process?
Kev, it's Andy. Could I just ask one question?
Yes, sir.
Julie, do you know how long it would take to do eminent domain ballpark?
Ballpark to do eminent domain would probably be 1 to 2 years to do all of these steps that the town would have to do to go through the eminent domain process, including the valuations, the legal portion of it, the town meeting portion of it. And after that, the town could potentially be in litigation for another 2 to 4 years if the value of the eminent domain taking is disputed by the property owner. But the process, depending on where it falls in the time of year, 1 to 2 years. And again, because we have town meeting, it's not like you have town meeting every week where you can just pick it up any week. You've really got to make sure that you're falling within either the fall town meeting, the annual town meeting, or you have to schedule a special town meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else for questions relative to the eminent domain? I guess I would have just one quick question while we have you up there relative to, we didn't have any luck with our original proposals that went out with some of our other options in front of us being lengthy multi-year processes. Should we consider, or have you considered reopening that? If things change in a short amount of time in the commercial real estate world, any considerations to putting it back out there for another, I forget the window of time we had to post it and leave it open, just relative to that.
Through the chair, I'm trying to recall what the time frame was. I think we had it out for either 6 to 8 weeks, approximately, just to give bidders time to comply with all the requirements in the RFP. So you have to advertise it in the central register. There are a number of advertising processes. So I'm going to say 3 months, if we add everything in, probably somewhere between 2.5 and 3 months to put it out there again. So that is an option, to put it out one more time and reach out to those. We reached out to property owners in that area. We reached out to brokers, whether we knew if they had properties listed or not. We made sure everyone knew that it was out there. And again, we didn't get any response. It doesn't mean we couldn't try it again, but it would mean adding another, probably three months. We wouldn't have to redo the RFP. It's already done. So we could just reissue the RFP.
I just know one site that's been discussed just in this last week. I noticed there's a 22,000 square foot for lease sign, which indicates to me there's been some changes in their property, at least in their occupancy or potential occupancy. So I just know as things change, I just want to know if that was a consideration, that's all.
If the committee would want to go that route, we could certainly do that.
Any questions relative to the current state? Just looking off the agenda we have here, so we've talked about the options briefly about West Street, but we'll get some more from our friends from Tecton. Lemansky, we discussed private property, eminent domain. Could we get Jeff, would you be willing to give us some, come up and give us some discussion relative to, it's been a long time since we've discussed dual facilities as opposed to one consolidated public safety facility and that West Street site that's being considered?
Sure. So I forget exactly when we did this, but we did a number of test fits looking at parcels associated with the West Street location. And as was already reported, that with the currently owned property, we were able to come up with a possible solution that fits on the property. I am going to say that I prefer some of the solutions that have the added property because I think it gives you more flexibility with the building planning and certainly more capacity for the essential site necessities of parking and green space and those sorts of things. Having said that, the single parcel was enough to accommodate the building. I suspect that we're going to have some increased costs because of that smaller parcel due to stormwater retention and things like that. But it is viable.
Can you just, again, sort of refresh some of the project-related things or some of the reasons we had initially voted as a committee to go with the one facility as our direction? It was one facility. That was our goal. We haven't voted to say that isn't our current goal, but as opposed to now doing a police fire headquarters at West Street and then a substation at the existing headquarters.
Yeah, and it's primarily related to that the RFP requirements that were sent out for the potential acquisition of property is getting the ideal response location so that you could operate out of a sole facility and still service, all portions of the town reasonably inequity to the way that they're served today. If we locate everything solely at West Street, then we don't get that equity in response time to the whole community. And so that's what drives the need to retain some sort of a substation presence at the current fire headquarters site. With the thought that we were going to get some responses to that RFP and get a good piece of property, we could have accommodated the entire public safety operation on a sole site and still met all the response time criteria. Since that has not come to pass thus far, we're looking at the options available, and West Street certainly gives us the option for fulfilling much of the public safety need on that location, and with the retention of the existing fire headquarters. You reduce a little bit of the programmatic demand on the West Street site because you will have vehicles located, apparatus located at the headquarters site as well. But it adds, making sure that headquarters site is ready to continue on for service.
Anybody on the committee have questions for Jeff? Julie? Yes, thank you. No, I very appreciate the questions, please.
Time frame in which the town kind of outgrew the current police station, and that West Street seems to be a good fit for now. How quickly do you anticipate us outgrowing that, and then being in this process 10, 20 years from what we think today?
Well, the programming exercise that we went through includes about 25 years of growth, looking ahead at at staffing changes and information relative to the growth of the community, so that we feel pretty confident that you would have at least 25 years of capacity within the program, which means that that if you add a few officers, or if you have minor changes in staffing or in operations, that you have space to accommodate that. We also try to plan into our public safety facilities a little bit of flexibility so that it can evolve with programmatic change. Given the fact that your prior facility was arguably too small on day one, it's what I heard reported from the story, we're planning on being too big on day one by enough to accommodate growth into the future. Now, again, having a little bit of extra land just is like it's an insurance policy against the unknown. Things can happen in the future to a community that cause growth that we don't see today. So there's an insurance policy of having available additional property.
Was that 25-year projection the same for the one facility? As far as size and capacity and future?
Yeah, the projection is based on, the apparatus and the department staffing and, a whole variety of different components. And when you take that overall program, which is, was originally was put together for one site, and then we think about, okay, those kinds of growth are still going to happen, but we're going to accommodate them on two sites now. So that allows you a little bit more flexibility in there. And certainly, if we find that we don't fully use every bay in the headquarters, or there were some minor potentials that we could use for growth over at the headquarters site, that may buy us a little bit of extra time in that in that growth range, without having, by the way, done a full-blown study of that.
Jeff, in your professional opinion, do you believe that we should purchase possibly both the sites on Southbridge Street that abut West Street to give us more room? What would that do for you? Would that help out?
With the test fits, we were able to accommodate program and still have some additional space with a single purchase. I'm gonna give you Jeff's personal opinion, and let you take that for what it's worth. I find too many times where I see communities miss an opportunity to give themselves a greater insurance policy, and so Jeff's personal opinion is it'd be great if it's possible to achieve both. But as a professional, I always also recognize, that everybody lives within a budget, and everybody, has to be able to support these changes or these acquisitions. And so, from my professional opinion, the acquisition of one site would be satisfactory to substantially support the programmatic needs and buy you additional capacity for the future. How's that for convoluted?
I thought based on Julie, I thought based on what you said, we could only purchase one because of the whole sole source, and then the other one wouldn't be a direct purchase. I just want to make sure I understood.
So,
Sorry, so you could
that's right,
identify both
to
as
purchase one only, you have to make sure it's been classified as a unique property or sole source. If there are two properties, I'm not an attorney, but I would assume that you can't have two unique properties. Only one could make a unique property. So if you wanted to purchase two, you'd have two options. You'd be able to put it out to bid, an RFP, and see if one or both property owners were interested in selling and provide a proposal to the town for doing that. And if that didn't happen, you'd have to go the eminent domain route for the one or both that chose not to respond and sell under a friendly taking.
So if one did decide to respond to the RFP, then the other one could be potentially considered a sole source, and we can negotiate that way.
That's an interesting question. I would have to check with the attorney on that because you're making that determination after you've determined that you need two parcels. So I don't know when you determine you need two, one sells and one doesn't, if then the one that doesn't becomes sole source. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
That would be a question for town council. Interesting concept, though.
Chief Coleman, do you have?
Mr. Chairman.
Still have the mic.
Yeah, I'm not letting go of this. Just to kind of follow up on that question. So the test fits that we saw obtaining one, again, because both of those parcels are of equal size, we actually wouldn't need both. So one of those parcels, regardless of which one it would be sufficient in size for not only the adjustments we need, but into the future. So in my opinion, I don't think you need both. I think one is fine. Just to sort of follow up as well on what Jeff said, and to just bring you back the 2 years, believe it or not, that we've actually been working, on this project and we've all been together. I just want to reiterate something that was said 2 years ago when we started this. And when you sort of look historically on the projects that the town has done, historically, and again, I think it's all with good intention that we're trying to be fiscally responsible. We're trying to make sure that projects are not overblown and overinflated. I get all of that. I do not want to be involved in a project that's overblown and overinflated. But we often, when you look at the history, we as a community have a history of trying to cram 5 pounds of 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And I think sometimes that is, although the intentions are good, it's short-sighted. And the example that I use all the time is in 1964, when we built fire headquarters, to save $3,000 on steel, we did not put in the appropriate size steel beams across the apparatus floor, which is what prevents us today from building on top of the apparatus bay, because we didn't want to spend $3,000 in 1964 to look into the future. And I think when you look at projects across the town, we have a history of doing that. And and this is the job of the committee, it's the job of us as town administration, that we need to make it clear that we're not looking for an oversized, overblown project, but we have to think about what the growth is going to be and planning those things. Because and I've said this to many of you, I've said it to town administration, I would rather not build a project than to build something that's going to be outgrown either the day we move in or in 10 years, because I don't want my name associated with a project like that. It's short-sighted, and I think we all have to do our part to convince the residents that what we're asking for is what we need, not only for today, but for reasonable growth in the future. Now, can any of us sit here and say what's going to happen 50 years from now? No. But I think in that 20 to 25-year range that Jeff is talking about, I think that's absolutely possible. And we just need to, as we move forward with this project, providing that it's approved, we have to make sure that the pencil is not sharpened so much to the point where we're constructing an ineffective building. And that is my number one concern with this project, only because of the history of other projects that have gone on since the 60s and beyond. And I just want to make sure that, you know, we pay attention to that, because it's a real thing, and it's a great question that Julie asked, because it's a real problem and a real concern, at least for me.
Anybody for anything for the chief? Rick?
Chief, did you look into the conservation issues on the two?
Street site?
Yeah,
So I did look into that. According to conservation, it is flagged in a few areas on the back there. The answer that I got from conservation was that they really can't give me an answer as to the scope, and even Tecton had indicated this, that if it's the committee's desire to move forward with this, we need a geo study over there to fully look at it. But conservation does have wetlands on file on the side that's closer to West Street near the Mass Electric property, and that comes up along the backside of Perros, and that comes down to 12. But what they don't know is the width of that or the expansion. But the wetlands do exist in that area behind and adjacent to Perros up to the Mass Electric side.
the only reason I ask, if we're going to look at that property, we should check it out beforehand.
Through the chair, I would also ask that the same thing would have to happen before the town made any decision to move forward on the purchase of any private property. There has to be a complete environmental analysis done. You know, what was the prior use? Is there a DEP filing on it? Is there any type of, were there any kind of spills that were remediated that still require ongoing monitoring by DEP? So that has to be looked at for any private property also before the town would look at acquiring it, and what the cost would be if there were any remediation issues.
Here's one more follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So again, just sort of recap, when I was talking about the whole, 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, it would also be my recommendation that we at least pursue purchasing one of the adjacent properties. I'm not a huge fan of eminent domain. I'm not sure that's the right thing for the community or for the business community. There are neighbors too, but I think not to make an effort to at least inquire about the purchase of those properties because we're told that, well, it will fit over there. If we inquire and they're not interested in selling, okay, at least we inquired and we live within the confines we have. But my hope would be that the committee at least explore the possibility of figuring out whether or not one of those adjacent properties would be looking to sell, because I think that's only going to benefit the project not only today, but for years to come.
Yes.
Chief, I totally agree with you up to 1964, but I would be remiss, coming from my background, when you said that all the projects, because I believe our high school and our middle school certainly meet the needs of the students and the kids in this town. Before those, I can't argue with you. I'm not trying to argue with you, but I'm saying, from my background, I'm sitting here, I don't want to say that those two buildings don't meet the needs of our kids.
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm not going to disagree. But the lots that they are on are not desirable. And this committee has talked about this. The high school, the middle school, they're beautiful buildings. They serve the needs of the kids. But the high school is a perfect example of a building that was put on a parcel that really needs to be bigger in order to accommodate what needs to go on. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to be parking at Shaw's for football games. So you're right. The buildings are sufficient. They're not outgrown. They're good buildings. But it falls into my category of 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag.
Yeah, it's irrelevant to this particular case. It's just, I was sitting here and I just had to put my 2 cents in.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to take the mic then for a second. And Chief, you segued a couple of my things. You're right. I looked back at my emails before I came up today, and I was kind of shocked that we've been at this since, I think, September of 2019. You know, obviously, we had some delays, and COVID put us back, but certainly it's been 2 years to date. So when we talk about process and legal process taking time, I don't have as much of a concern at this point because we're already 2 years into this thing, and I want to make sure that I think any of us want to put our name on this. In the end, we want it to be done right and done correctly, and if that takes another period of time, I'm okay with that. We'll see what the rest of the committee has to say. I look back at the PowerPoints and some of the presentations that Tecton had done, and we had sort of adopted, because we kind of came into this process not knowing about these facilities. Some folks worked in them, some worked in the police stations, some worked in the fire stations, maybe didn't know all the intricacies and the shortcomings, really, of those current facilities, but got to know these facilities pretty well, thankfully to the police and fire administration, showing us these facilities and their shortcomings, and learning from Tecton what a modern public safety facility looks like. And we came to an agreement that we wanted to see a consolidated public safety facility. And some of the reasons we put in the document that Tecton had prepared and that we started to market and advocate for throughout the community in preparation, hopefully, for having a piece of land and getting a vote through town meeting to move this process, and ultimately the voters to move this process forward, were things like shared lobbies, shared fitness facilities, shared mechanical rooms. Sitting on the finance committee, I don't know how often we hear police, fire, and other agencies coming back for service contracts on various different components of facilities. Shared training rooms, tremendous reduced restrooms, things of that nature. There was a whole host of benefits for a shared, combined, single public safety facility as opposed to having two facilities. Another thing that jumped out to me as I looked through that presentation was we had a lot of discussions about the current fire headquarters and its location. And Matt, you probably wrote this one down, because the FEMA regulatory floodway. Did I get that one right? Yeah. Okay. And the quote that's in the presentation, it was a substantial improvements or renovations to that facility would prohibit us from applying for future federal grants. So as we talk, and I'll have probably some questions relative to that, should we go to this West Street Police Headquarters, Fire Headquarters, and retain the center of town Drury Square facility as a substation? Would any future needs for that facility potentially preclude us still from federal grants? There was the cost, and the combined public safety facility, obviously there was a considerable savings. And a lot of the stuff, the critical stuff, I think, for the folks that work in these facilities, primarily fire, because they're dealing with uber-duper bad stuff on a regular basis, was decon and health safety. And would that current substation, the headquarters, be able to be renovated to such a place that we could have the right distances and decontamination space and things of that nature? Or are we just sort of kicking that can down the road a little bit for that facility? Yeah, and I understand, and Jeff, when you program as an architect, when you program things 25 years, seems like a short amount of time. For folks in the community that are voting on a plan, 25 years is not going to seem like a shorter period of time when they're looking to outlay millions of dollars. So I do have a lot of concern about that West Street property, that we're going back to what was done with the police station and putting it on a parcel that didn't allow for future expansion. somebody's names are on a plaque, I'm sure somewhere in the police lobby, that there was a committee to build that building. Our names, if this goes forward and with success, will end up in a lobby. And again, we want it in the best public safety facility for this community, for the men and women of the police and fire department to work in. So I do have some concerns about that, leaning towards the West Street side. Personally, I feel like we should be continuing to explore options. Chief, you highlighted and it was a combined effort, but that Shaw's property to me is still in my mind. I know it is not ideally in the sweet spot location-wise, but it is a facility that I think a combined use with an additional land for parking for additional events, along with a public safety facility right close to the heart of some of our schools, is the right place. At some point, if somebody builds on that property, I don't know what we'll do for events at that facility. Was at flag football this weekend, and there were 80 cars parked in the Shaw's Bed Bath & Beyond lot. And if there was some other business there that took that whole lot, I'm not sure where folks would park. There's only so many spots at the library. There's only so many spots. I don't know where they would put their cars. So I think we, personally, I still think we should be looking towards the combined facility. We should be looking at sites. I think the commercial market is ever changing. To see what is out there. And I'll open it up to the committee or anybody else those are just sort of my remarks relative to where we are in the process and where we've come from. Chief Murray?
We looked at the Ramada property.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the most logical piece of property for this facility. And, whatever it costs, I think we should definitely look at that and consider it. If you take that property, it's not going to affect anybody or any business. And I think that's a big factor. These are the two most important departments in town, and they should have a facility in the best area. I think that being said, I really think we should really look at that seriously.
My understanding, Chief, through some rumblings, were that property owner may have another plan for that property, and that's why they didn't put in for the other. They may have plans, alternate plans, or for that development of that site. That's where the rumblings were as to why they did not put in a proposal when we put out that proposal, because they had taken out paperwork for that site, as well as Simon Properties for the Sears Auto site had taken out paperwork, but neither of them returned, saying they were interested in selling the land. I agree. You look at displacing two businesses, Shaw's and Bed Bath & Beyond, but, is there a desire for some of those, because they both lease from their current property, is there a desire for them to relocate into a newer, more modern facility as well? And that could be, one of the Simon Properties across the street, which is, all intents and purposes, vacant at the moment. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to it.
Well, eminent domain is pretty powerful.
Yes, sir. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions? Chief?
Consulted with the town manager quickly, and she can certainly follow up. I think, to the chief's point, one of the things that makes this conversation very difficult is there's this elephant in the room where we really can't ask the question that we want to know, which is, are any of these parcels, do they want to sell them? And legally, we can't ask that question. And that's the difficult part of this. We could engage in conversation with them equally and make sure that they were all notified of things equally, which we did before. But legally, we can't ask the question, do you want to sell or not? And that's the struggle, that we have. Is I think we all have ideas of what a good parcel would be, but we're all really in the dark in terms of what they're looking to do because we can't ask. So, for that purpose, we did engage with those three businesses equally. They didn't submit for whatever reason. So I think to do the same exercise again, in my opinion, is sort of pointless. unless you can ask the question, which we know we can't, are you willing to sell? Because I don't think the result is going to change. It just puts us in a really tough spot, you know, and again, to the chief's point, it really sort of drives you to that eminent domain piece. It would really just be nice if we could ask the point blank question and get the answer.
There's a for sale sign on the property. So it's for sale.
Correct. Correct. To the town manager, are there any other, I understand town administration cannot ask the question. This committee is not in a position to ask commercial properties that they sell. Is there a way legally for the town through an intermediary able to ask that same question without asking the question? Is that?
Can I answer the question without answering the question?
Sure, we're in that realm.
I mean, it's interesting. The problem is, as the chief said, we're a municipality, so we're subject to Chapter 30B requirements for procurement, whether it's the acquisition of real property or the disposition of property. And different rules in the law apply to different aspects of it. When we issued the RFP the first time, we marketed it as best as we were allowed to under the law. Meaning, as a municipality, and you would all fall under the same things. I don't think any one of you could go out and do anything different than us, because technically you're town employees. So under the law, we made the RFP available. We actually did the outreach to brokers. We actually gave it, and it was picked up by the broker who is selling the former Lowe's property. That broker actually came in and picked up a copy of the RFP, so they have it. We let the Simon Properties know that it was out there. One of the other properties that you talked about was not on the market. So instead of, we didn't reach out to the property owner, we advertised it, we posted it, we talked a lot about it. We went to brokers that we weren't even aware if they had property or not, but we thought, you know what, they're a broker, they're in town. Maybe they, at some point, have had conversations with an owner who's willing to sell, but just hasn't put their property on the market yet. So we did the outreach that we could do without violating any laws, which is to give any one property owner any more information than others. So once you put an RFP out, even if a property owner or anyone has questions, you're required under the law to have a public walkthrough or a public meeting where they can come in and ask the questions. You are required to write down what the questions were, write down what your responses were, and send that out to everyone who picked up the RFP. Everybody has to have equal footing when it comes to a bid. So I think the long answer is I don't think anyone affiliated with town administration or this committee could do any outreach beyond what we did without violating any laws under Chapter 30B procurement, which is really to keep an open market for property owners to respond to.
Good.
When was that put out?
That was put out,
Sorry,
I believe,
COVID, yeah.
last summer.
A while ago, yeah. That was a while ago.
Summer of 2020?
That was put out, I'm sorry, I believe we put it out in March, March or April of this year, of 2021.
21, okay.
Because at that time, we were looking to get responses back by, I think, the end of June, early July, so we could potentially, if we had someone who was willing to sell, we would be able to set up a special town meeting for October with a ballot question in September.
We're sure that was this year.
That was this year.
And we couldn't ask for like an architectural firm that happened to be on contract for other means to try and identify parcels that were for sale. Would they be acting as your agent at that point, or is that?
If any of the committee members did that, yes. You could not do that. We could not do that.
You can't do that, okay.
I mean, if anyone from, any resident who's watching this says, oh, I'm watching this, and how come, I'm not on the committee, I'm going to make a phone call. But we just can't do that. We can't taint the processes. It's really restrictive how you
Could I
handle
make a
it.
comment?
Yes, Mark.
So I have to apologize. The audio's awful, and I've missed some of the finer details. But I have to echo Chief Murray's sentiment on this, that we're potentially letting the best prime location slip through our fingers. I'm not sure it matters at all that they're in the process of selling to someone else. And I have to wonder that if we made the call to sell it, what's the actual ramification if you violate that law? What actually happens?
I can just tell you that I'm responsible for following the law. So regardless of what the consequences are, if the law isn't followed, that's not my job to determine that. My job is to follow the law. So I'm going to have to, and will continue to always follow what we're supposed to do under the process. I can't tell you what would happen if we didn't make that choice, but I will never do that.
Thank you. Could I just ask the Tecton sort of discuss the fire headquarters, or maybe Chief Coleman, someone discuss if it was the decision to go with the two headquarters down the West Street site and the retention of the existing fire headquarters for a substation, how do we get around, or I shouldn't say get around, where do we land in terms of the limitations that building has relative to size of apparatus bays and decontamination areas and all of the above?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Matt and I have had some preliminary conversations about if fire headquarters was to become a substation, it's not a turnkey operation. There would obviously need to be, we estimate, and these are rough estimations, but probably somewhere about $2 million worth of renovations that would need to go into the building to address the very things that you just talked about. So if you picture fire headquarters where my office is, the deputy, my administrative assistant, basically all of that first floor on the other side of the apparatus floor would be stripped out and gutted. And then that would become the transition between the hot, the warm, and the cold. And all of those other storage areas and other things that were lacking would basically be rebuilt along that other wall. So it's a great point, because I don't want the public or anybody to think that just because we're building over here, all of these other problems don't exist anymore. Those will still have to be addressed. But we believe that we have the room to do that. But I'll turn that over.
Yeah, I think, apologize for being a little tardy this evening, but just to echo what the chief said, I think he hit it on the head. We would work within the confines of the existing structure. And work within that footprint to make sure that we were able to accommodate what they need to keep that going forward. In terms of what we wouldn't want to do is any additions or things like that outside of the existing footprint. And that's when we would start to get into impacts where we would have to look at the impact of the FEMA floodway and how that would relate to the rest of the facility. And I think one thing we did know early on was that if we were to do significant work where we would have to add on to the building or anything like that, or make modifications to the structure, that we would want to look at reclassifying that FEMA floodway so that it would be further out of the buffer potentially if we were to do any significant work. So it's not something we wouldn't look into and say, no, you can't do any of this, but it's just something that requires further study in order to do that. But we think we can, with a minimal cost, provide some enhancements to the existing building to make it a viable substation for the future.
Through the chair, sorry, we were just having a conversation, and I just want to follow up on my response to Mark. So my response to Mark, and maybe I misunderstood the question, or maybe he didn't hear the conversation, because I know it's hard. So Mark, I apologize if some of this isn't coming through. The Chapter 30B process is very clear. You have to follow the Chapter 30B process, as is the eminent domain. But if maybe I misunderstood, I thought Mark was asking what we do, how can we go get a property that we want? And what would happen if we didn't follow the process? But the process you can follow, which is a legal process, is the eminent domain process. That is still an option. And it's not that that is off the table, and I think that's what the chief is saying, that if you see a parcel you want, and that's the one you want to go after, then your process for doing that is eminent domain. Your process for doing that is not putting it out to bid, because we've done that. And so through eminent domain, there is a process where, I think I put a page in your packets, but there's a whole process where you notify the property owner that you're taking the property. You get a vote of the Board of Selectmen to do that. Then you get a vote of the board to get the appraisals. Then you get your appraisals. Then you get your votes of town meeting, both for the pro tanto award, for the price that you're going to pay. So there's a whole series of steps in there that you follow, and that is a process. It exists. You follow the process, and there's no reason you can't do that. You just have to think through the timing of it and the cost of it. But I think Ed, I'm going to turn to him. Ed made a really good point about one reason we feel we didn't get any bids when we put it out, because we knew a couple of those properties were either on the market now or soon to be on the market. And we thought for sure this was their opportunity to provide a bid. But there were so many steps in between them giving us a bid and us potentially buying it. That probably was a deterrent. But let me just turn to Ed.
So I think some of the complexities that we're all facing, which makes this very difficult process, is that even if we put it out for bid, we have no commitment by town meeting or the voters of this community at the time that goes out to bid. So you almost have to go to the voters in advance seeking an authorization funded through a debt exclusion, not only for the eminent domain or the land acquisition piece, if there is a willing property owner willing to sell, but you also have to get a commitment for the project. It doesn't make any sense to go out and purchase the land and then have the project fail if you're bringing a $45 million project to the voters and they say, we don't want this. So now we're sitting on a parcel of land that we can't do anything with because they're both tied together. You almost need a dual authorization to bring to the voters and then ultimately authorized by town meeting.
So that sort of brings us back to, which direction we sort of want to go in, and that's a little bit different of a direction even on the funding side than I think we had discussed previously, is that advanced town meeting authorization. You're going to forgive me, I'm going to click buttons here again, but I'm going to see if I can click mute Mark, because I'm getting feedback there. Last time I did it, I muted everybody in the town, so I apologize.
The caller has got to mute their.
I was able to mute Mark Mars from here, so I won't mute anybody else, I promise. That's why my kids don't let me handle the remote control at home. As to a direction is which way we're going to go, whether it's we stick with our initial 18-month-old recommendation of a single public safety facility and continue to explore how we identify a parcel. And I think if we were to decide to stay with a single public safety facility, then I think we would need a presentation, another meeting, another presentation from Tecton to see whatever sites are still out there and that you've done proposals for, to see exactly what it would look like and redo some cost numbers, if that's the direction the committee wants to go, or if we want to go the direction of the West Street station. Again, I don't know if the committee has enough information at this point to whether or not they want to go that direction. If they're going to need more information relative to Tecton to see what it looks like relative to whether it's ideally, whether the site would work without any additional parcels being acquired, whether a single parcel, what it would look like with a single parcel, what it would look like with the dual parcel added to the front. It's just there's a lot of questions that still remain with this project. I think we were in a good direction, and now I feel like we're not quite back at the beginning. I think we're still in agreement that the need is there, and that this isn't going to go away, and that the current facilities are not adequate for a modern day professional police and fire forces. Committee members, can you help me out a little bit here? You were sort of, anybody have any thoughts on directions or votes you'd like to take, or?
I feel like West Street and a few Band-Aids to Drury Square is going to put us back here 10, 12, 15 years from this spot. From what we know today and just the presentations we've had to date, I'd like to continue. I don't want to be, another 3 to 5 years here, but I think the one facility is still the best avenue. That being said, whether we try to go in eminent domain so Julie, one question with the eminent domain. How soon, and this is assuming that we did everything, we got the dual authorizations and, we try to go down that path. How soon can an eminent domain be filed such that it kind of puts a stay on that property owner to forbid him from selling out from underneath that process? Am I get my question clear? Okay.
Is this on? Okay. My understanding is, and again, you have to turn to town council for the legal aspects of this, but if you're going after if you're trying to purchase a specific property, let's say you identify the property, that's the property you want, and you move forward in the eminent domain process, even if that property is sold in the meantime, you're still seeking to purchase that property through eminent domain, regardless of the owner.
Okay, so it wouldn't put in...
That would be, my non-legal answer is, it doesn't matter who owns the property or if the owner sells it in the midst of this, the town would be proceeding along an eminent domain process, in which case it would receive the appraisals, make the payment to the owner, whoever that owner is at the time. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I was just curious. So if the current owner hears rumblings that we're going down this path, we do authorization, now we're 6 months out before we would even file the eminent domain. Once we did that, it wouldn't matter. Like you said, if they sold it in the meanwhile, we would still be going
Correct.
through that process.
I think an owner probably could still sell it. There's nothing to prevent an owner from selling it. But you do have to follow the eminent domain process. And one of the steps is to provide the notification to the property owner, the current property owner, that you're looking to do this process. So they would be aware of it up front, even if you're not even a quarter of the way through the process. I think early on in the process, you notify the property owner that this is the desire of the town. Again, then back to Eddie's point, then there's all the votes that are needed. So that's why I don't mean to talk in generalities, but 1 to 2 years, it could be 1 year, depending on where the votes fall. I mean, you need to know that you're going to get the votes of the residents for this. You need to know you're going to get the money. You need to know you're going to get the money for the purchase of the property as well as the building of the facility. So where that falls in an election, and then how do you know what money you need to have if you haven't had your appraisals yet? So pretty much you have to have your appraisals first, because you need to know what your cost is going to be. So I think it's fair to say probably on the 2-year end of an eminent domain process, and not counting the legal process that may follow it, which is going to take place whether you can still move forward on your process in your project. It doesn't stop the owner from disputing it in court and going to court over it. They have 3 years from the time you take the property to file something. So I wouldn't even count that part of it, because that's just an added years that may or may not happen.
I feel like it's what came first, the chicken or the egg type question, because do we get the authorizations to see if the town would even be willing to want to purchase the property and then approve the facility first, or do you get the eminent domain first to know we have that property available to us? So it's complicated.
It's complicated. It's obviously, it's easier if a municipality owns the property, because then you're going for the authorization for the debt exclusion vote from the voters, and then you're going to town meeting for the authorization to borrow. It's more complicated when you have to add in an eminent domain process. There's no question. And to Ed's point, I think the issue is there's no set rule on which you do first, but before you go through the eminent domain process, you do need to have the authorization to do it. So that absolutely requires a vote at town meeting. I guess the issue is whether you put forward if you put forward the question on the facility itself at the same time as the eminent domain. Because as we're saying, the worst case scenario would be you purchase the property, and then you don't get the vote to build the building on it. I don't know that that would happen, because I think for the most part, you know, it's a community of 16,000. I think with education, everyone's going to realize if you're voting for the eminent domain, you're voting for it because you want to purchase it, because you want to build a facility. But all of that is a matter of timing.
Chief Coleman, did you, I know Jeff's working frantically over there to get some.
So as Julie was just talking, talk about the chicken and the egg. So with the eminent domain process, it says that we notify the owner that we're looking to go through that process, right? Again, to Julie's chicken and the egg point, there's a part of me that just, I can't wrap my head around how we approach the owner to tell them that we're going through eminent domain when we haven't even asked them whether or not they're willing, you know, to sell the property. So I guess my question is, if the committee determines that that is the parcel that they want and that's the parcel that they want to pursue, does that now open a door for a conversation with the property owner to say, the committee has decided that this is the property. Are you willing to sell? And if not, we're going to move through the eminent domain process. So by declaring that it's the property we want, does that open any door for conversation? It does not.
I'm saying, again, it's a legal question. If you're, I know what the intent is here, and I'm trying to be careful how I answer it. I know what everyone's trying to get to at the end game. I'm just trying to walk through the process to get us there. I don't know what the answer to that would be. If the committee took a vote, it still has to go to the Board of Selectmen to authorize town manager to initiate eminent domain procedures. And one of the first steps in the eminent domain procedure is to notify the property owner that you're going after the property. So at that point, it's a legal question. If the property owner turned around and said, well, I'd rather sell it to you than have you take it, I have to be honest, I don't see a situation that would happen, because an eminent domain process gives the property owner still the opportunity to go through and legally argue to get more money than you're willing to pay. So I don't know that they would, but could they? I suppose they could. The question then arises, if they did that, now you haven't taken it by eminent domain. Now you have a property owner making an offer to you to buy your property, and you're right back to, well, it's not sole source, because there are 3 other parcels that we've all talked about, so it's not sole source. So in order to buy it, this property owner would have to respond to an RFP. So at that point, do you then go out with an RFP and hope this property owner comes through? It's my non-legal answer. I think you still ultimately have to go through the public procurement process, even if they indicate they're willing to sell. The town wouldn't have the authority to purchase without going through the Chapter 30B process. I believe that's going to be the answer, but can check it with town council.
Thank you. Jeff, you got some things to share with us?
Certainly, yeah. Just I felt like we ought to just put those test fits up on the screen for you to take a quick look at so that you understand. And I failed to look at the date. Matt, was this midsummer? So the one over my shoulder right now is the one using only the property that you own, and you can see, you know, these test fits are, you know, quick ideas about how to place the building. It is the result of a detailed floor plan, but sort of a, you know, understanding the program, looking at the square footages and how we might arrange them on the site. So in this case, we have a fire apparatus bay with doors front and back that allows trucks to egress directly out onto West Street, and then also to loop around the back onto West Street. Typically, you're going to place your larger vehicles, your frontline vehicles, along the front so that they get the shortest apron right out onto the street, and then some of your smaller vehicles or second line vehicles would be in the back so that they can do the loop around and get out into West Street. We did have a modest public parking lot right in front of the building, anticipating that we would have an entry point, and that this little rectangle, and that this big structure would be the bulk of your shared facility, as well as your offices and living quarters for the fire department, and all of the office and workspace and detention and evidence and all of that for the police department. We are showing Sallyport to the rear, parking lot at the back, and then along the side. And then we did cut through on this leg of the parcel an egress route out to Southbridge Street. You can see that even in this scheme that we left some available property. I just checked with Oliver GIS just now, and this is still the wetlands that the GIS is mapping. If we were going to pursue this site, we would get out there and do some additional wetlands verification right off the bat so that we don't keep chasing something that's not going to work. The things I will point out that are troublesome about this, just using this parcel, is that I do know that there's some pretty good topography on the intersection between the parking lot from the school and the back of the existing fire station. So with this floor plan, and believe me, if you told me we were going to do this on this site, we would brainstorm a lot of different solutions. But with this floor plan, we'd be looking at retaining walls along that back edge there. So a little bit of a downside to this solution, but you can see even still we do have available land. The second option that we did uses the adjacent parcel over here. We did not use all of it because we did withhold a wetlands setback, an assumed wetlands setback on that parcel, 100 feet. So right now this building is actually on that parcel, and there's another building on that parcel. So we didn't use all of it here, being aware that there might be wetland. In this case, you can see the whole public safety building moved all the way over onto this parcel. Again, a double-loaded apparatus bay with direct access out to Southbridge Street, public parking lot, and then the bulk of the police and living quarters of fire and operation space, and then a parking lot in the back. And again, in this solution, you see that we still left a parcel of land unutilized. I can tell you that as we study this further, we'll probably come up with a different solution that would end up being the building that you actually move forward with, because these test fits are designed to come up with for the sole purpose of coming up with, will it fit on the site? And the fact that we have some available land suggests to me that yes, they will fit on the site. Then it becomes a question of optimal arrangement. As I said earlier, I do think with the acquisition of one parcel, you would get a more optimal arrangement. And again, that doesn't, the discussions that are going on here go into a lot of different territory, but I just wanted to demonstrate that you do have the potential for a viable solution utilizing the existing headquarters as a substation at this site.
Just one quick thing to add to, Jeff. Both those schemes do require 3 stories. Yeah. And it's zoned for 2 stories, so that would require a ZBA application.
Any questions relative to the site? Does anybody have any motions that you want to do? So we've, as far as our agenda, I think we've covered just about everything on the agenda. Relative to the evening, it's sort of as to what direction do we want to go in? Do we want to?
Kevin, I'd make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion for the committee to consider making a recommendation to the town administration to begin the process of land taking at the Langway property.
That's the Lowe's.
Yes.
Okay, one remark before we take on the vote on that. Should we tailor it back just to start with our desire is to stick with the single public safety facility as opposed to splitting it? and then move to as to how we hope to accomplish that. Mark, you still on?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin, I came through garbled.
I'm just wondering if I understand the spirit of what you were trying to accomplish. I wonder if we should discuss first whether we wish to stay with our original recommendations for a single public safety facility. Take a motion on that first, and then that should give us some guidance as to what our next steps would be in order to accomplish that. But I'm happy.
Okay, well, we identified two properties as like A and B, or the two prime facilities and locations in town. And, we took a little left turn because one seemed, the spot across from the police station seemed a little bit more viable and a little bit easier, and it turned out not to be. And I think we should return to those two primary locations that allow us a single-use facility.
Okay. So let me just try and phrase it, and if you're okay with it, Mark, we'll put a motion forth to maintain the single desire of this committee to be a single public safety facility as opposed to a split, and then we'll.
Yes.
Okay. So we have a.
It's a start.
Okay.
I'll second that.
JD Dowd seconds it. We'll do a roll call since we have somebody that's remote here. Julie, is there any discussion relative to the? Thank you. Discussion relative to that motion to maintain our original desire as to a single public safety facility as opposed to splitting the two.
Absolutely.
Sir.
I think we're going to look at eminent domain is going to take a while. We're looking at escalation costs if we delay construction. What can we do now? We can move on to the West Street site. There is room for it. It is a little tight, providing we can get another piece of land that would assist with it. The headquarters station, providing we stick within the actual square footage and do some renovations to it, we won't violate the losing the grants. We have an opportunity there to upgrade that building. Also, the cost in general would be a lot cheaper than building one giant facility. And the response times, right now, having the two stations will definitely be better than having the one station, even though the one station centrally located can still fall within the response times. I think it's something it's worthwhile to look at. I think the delay for the whole process in the end will end up costing us a lot more to try to get that piece of property. And as we all know, the station's now, at least on the West Street site, that building is old and is already having some issues. So the longer we delay it, the more issues we'll have.
Any other discussion relative to to Mark's motion?
Can I just get this? It's going to be one single facility. It won't be like a substation for the fire department. Is that what this motion is?
Mark, it's technically it's your motion. I'm just trying to.
There is no substation, Mark?
No substation, one facility at the Langway property, and we talked about that the response times for everybody from there were really, really good, actually.
Chief, further discussion?
I agree the response times are good from the single facility. They are actually better from the two facilities, but.
There's a quick question.
And it's not the fire substation's in a wetland, and that hasn't gone away.
Okay.
So this is just for, initially, we're going to keep concentrating on a single facility. That's not to say we can't change our mind later, we determine it's not feasible, right? Like this isn't going to lock us in, this motion, that we're going to hold out.
Start the eminent domain process.
This will lead to the discussion relative to whether town administration decides to put something before town meeting I'm sorry? Before the selectmen to decide whether they want to go through that, start that process. It basically sort of maintains our original focus, which was to Same facility. But again, we hit detours along the way with our original plans, and we're back here again, so I don't think, things could change.
I just have a comment. I mean, for the last year and a half, we've discussed all the process and what's best and what's not best. Now, it appears to me, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going back to the beginning of this whole process. Without anything, for 2 years, we've just spun our wheels and have gone nowhere. So I see this motion taking us back to the future, okay? It's taking us back to where we started from again. And personally, I don't think that's where I want to go. I don't want to go back to wasting the 2 years that we had. We've done all our homework. We've had all kinds of tests done. We've had all the professionals give their opinion. So I can say I'm not in favor of this for that reason, only because it seems to put us back to square one. If there was some growth here I could see, maybe I could support this, but I don't see any growth in anything that we've done. That's all I got to say.
I'll put my foot in my mouth there for a second, but not to be disrespectful. I don't necessarily agree with your opinion on that, only because I think if we, and I'm still conflicted as whether or not we completely dismiss West Street or we move forward with the one. But I feel if we made the decision tonight to move forward with the one, then we stick to what we originally decided a year ago, year and a half ago, and it's actually going to move us forward because then it is next steps. It is, all right, this is what we're doing. We're going to make the motion that we're going to stick with one building, and that's what we move forward with. And then it's, okay, well, how are we going to do that now? So it does progress us forward in that we now have to take steps to acquire land, whether it's eminent domain or another, throw the RFP, it's 3 more months, throw the RFP out there again for 3 more months. What's 3 months going to delay us really at this point? Just to see if maybe someone has changed their minds. But I think it would be a step forward versus bringing us back to scratch. But again, my opinion.
Can you explain what this motion is? Is this motion?
The initial motion is just one facility. I think,
Auburn Street is gone. Or a substation is gone. So
that's the original motion. Then I think we should have some further discussion as to,
what do we gain by doing this? We're tying our hands even more. I'm not against it, one building. I think that would be great if we had a spot for it. We obviously don't, or we haven't found one yet. I'm not saying there won't be one. But why are we making this motion? What are we trying to accomplish here? We're just tying our hands.
I think town administration was hoping that we'd provide some guidance as to which direction this committee thought for them for next steps, whether it was we were in favor of splitting the facility and them identifying the 30B direction, the unique parcel sole source direction, which would be us leaning towards approving West Street for 2 headquarters and a substation. I think in order for them to pursue that avenue, it would have to be our opinion that that would be the best avenue for them to go. In order to pursue that would be to split our original proposal to 2 facilities.
But the town administration is going to have some sort of bid process or negotiation, or call it whatever you want. And why do we want to tie ourselves into a smaller ball? It doesn't make sense. We need room to maneuver. This is a difficult solution. Obviously, it's taken us 2 years. And if we say now we're only going to do it with one station, it limits the possibilities. To me, anyway.
This vote would be.
It would take away West Street because you can't put the whole thing on West Street.
Right. Well, this is to pursue what would be the Lowe's property by eminent domain based on this for the one site. That's how I understand this motion.
I understand that, but why do we need this motion to what does that have to do with buying the Lowe's property? We could put the fire and the police headquarters on the Lowe's property if we bought it. And still keep Auburn Street. If you did
Okay,
that.
so we can,
Well,
so how about if we just amend it?
If you did that, and 15 or 20 years from now, you wanted to expand, how would you expand? You would expand by putting a substation somewhere else. You wouldn't build a bigger building on the amount of property. You know what I'm saying? And the first thing you would do is to look somewhere around Drury Square or Packagard to put a substation. So I'm just saying.
So simply amend my motion to take the Lowe's property and in whatever form the committee decides.
I'm not against taking the Lowe's property at all, or looking into somehow buying it. I think it's a great idea. I'm just saying, why do we need this motion? I don't understand what the hell the motion.
That's what I'm saying. Let's amend the motion and take out the single-use facility portion of it and go back to what I said. Let's direct the town administration to take the Lowe's property by eminent domain. And then the committee can decide how they want to configure it.
I agree with that.
I think that some of the concern is going to be, Mark, that in order to go before the Board of Selectmen with a proposal and then ultimately the town meeting with a proposal to identify or appropriate monies to start this process for eminent domain, I think we have to have a plan that we're selling. And that can't be a sort of an in-between plan. I think it's going to have to come down to, I would even suggest, if we pick a direction tonight, whether it's single or dual facilities, and then come back later to see what these facilities would look like, because ultimately they're going to have to bring a proposal with at least some rough drawings and square footage and costs to the selectmen and ultimately town meeting to get those initial funds to start that eminent domain process. I don't think that just saying we want a site potentially for one thing or another is gonna get us too far in the process. That's just my gut feeling, and maybe town administration can give us some guidance relative to that, relative to any motions here.
If I may,
Yes.
and I apologize, I know I missed the last meeting in person, but I believe we had already come to the recommendation that we had already decided that we were going to try and go forward with one site. So I think right now what we're trying to figure out is if we're going to try and put out that, what do they call it, the RFP again, are we going to delay 3 more months? It's already been 2 years. Really, what's it matter at this point? 2 years, 3 months. But we've kind of already decided as a group that we were going to do this, or attempt to try and do one facility. I think right now what we need to try and decide is if we're going to try and do one facility and put that out to bid again and see if somebody bites, because things have changed and the market is changing and things are crazy as usual because COVID, or if we're just going to move forward with eminent domain. I think we keep trying to circle back. I don't know if we're getting cold feet, and that's why we are like, oh no, we don't want to lose this West Street. We don't want to lose the possibility. I don't think it's gone forever. I think we just need to decide. I think we've already decided that we're going to try and do one facility, and now we just need to decide which way we're going to go forward with it. And forgive me if I'm totally off base, but I feel like we just keep coming back to the very beginning because I don't know if we're getting nervous or cold feet or if we just can't decide. But I thought we had pretty much made some of these decisions already. So I would like to move forward, and I think that maybe that's what Mark was trying to get, that we had already decided to do the one building and now we should decide which avenue.
Maybe we should rescind the motion and then have a new motion to do the RFP again for the 3 months and see if anyone comes up, and then meet again and then.
Okay, so you're suggesting we've already, unless someone wants to make a motion to change our original one facility, which we've already voted on a year or 18 months ago.
Correct.
If there's not a motion to change that direction,
Yes.
then we should be looking to stay that course and have a motion relative to what our next step would be with that.
Correct, that would be the course I would.
Mark, you made the motion. Could you hear what Stephanie had to say?
Yes, I did, Kevin.
And your thoughts on the motion? Do you want to proceed with yours, or do you want to withdraw that and see what Stephanie has for a motion?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll withdraw mine.
Okay. Stephanie, since you...
So I would motion to try and do the RFP one more time, put it out. If that doesn't come back with anything, then move forward with eminent domain.
do we have a second on that motion? Second from Jimmy Charlton. Any discussions relative to that motion to put the RFP back out and see if there's any new folks out there willing to sell their properties?
I'm fine with the first half of going out for the RFP.
Okay.
Can we delay the second portion of that though with the eminent domain until we see what happens with the RFP?
Yes, I believe this one is just
That's fine,
strictly...
yes, that's
Okay,
fine.
well, there was an and,
Yes,
so I just wasn't sure if it was a both.
Okay, so I'll amend that to just put out the RFP and try one more time. Nope, I agree.
I just want to make sure.
Yes.
So that, I agree, I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Mark, you're only remote, so I'm going to do a roll call. Mark Foss? All in favor?
Yay.
Mark's a yay.
Yes.
Chief Murray? Is a yay? Rick, yay? Julie, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes? Yes. Okay, and I'm a yes, so it's unanimous that we're asking to go back out for the RFP and see what else, see who's out there, if we have any changes. Any other matters? Time frame, just so we can
Yeah,
get a...
through the chair, I'll just thank you for your recommendation on this. I don't need to go back to the board to put the RFP out again. We've already done that, so we can just take a look at it again. We should be able to get it out there quickly. The only, for timing, I just have to look. The Central Register comes out on Thursdays, and there's a requirement to get it in to the Central Register. I think, let's say it's 3 weeks before the deadline. That shouldn't be an issue. With the Thanksgiving holiday being on a Thursday, the Central Register, it couldn't go in for next Thursday. But we're still fine, as long as,
Yeah, we're into the holidays. I wouldn't see us meeting again until probably after the first of the year, to be honest, by the time we're...
it would be nice, we'd like to get it out sooner than later.
Sure.
As you said, and reach out to the same brokers that we reached out to initially, let them know it's back out there again, promote it, put it on our website. The Central Register is really where, if people are looking to sell their property, they look in the Central Register. So, that is a good place to advertise it, and we'll do our outreach again within the requirements that we're allowed to do it, and see if there's another taker. And then we'll probably add, I think, I'll look at it again, we were thinking 8 weeks to give a property owner the opportunity, because there's a lot of things that they have to submit to us.
That was actually going to be my follow-up question, is the submissions that they have to respond with, is that kind of already at minimum standards, or is there anything we could do to make it a little bit more minimal, but still within just maybe, who knows if it was hesitancy on their part, just looking at it and not wanting to,
No, that's a good question. We can certainly look and see what the minimal standards would be. A lot of that is driven by when it goes in the Central Register, how many days you have, how many weeks you have to give them before it closes. In the middle of that, you have to have a pre-bid conference opportunity, which we had, just we didn't have any attendees to it, which gives anyone who's potentially going to bid on it the opportunity to come in and ask questions. So we'll look at what the minimum amount is. You also want to be able to make sure you give them enough time to get the details together that you're required, because if they don't have all the details when they submit the bid, you have to throw the bid out.
well, mine was more about the details versus the time frame.
So right now, we're at I don't believe there's anything we want to remove.
Okay, that was my question, like, just make it a little bit easier maybe to respond.
Yeah, no, I think what's in there is what we need to have.
Okay.
It was reviewed by legal counsel. It's been all put together to meet all the requirements and all the requirements under the law. So it does take a little bit of time.
Okay, any other questions? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I second that.
Maybe the first, I give it.
There you go. Yeah, we'll motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody, for your patience and continued involvement.